Hi, it's Paul from Model Builder International. Today we're going to have a look at a kit that we sell in our shop. This is a new one from Claude. This is an A5M2b, the late version in 1/72 scale. The A5M was introduced in the summer of 1937 in the air war over China, and it quickly proved itself to be better than anything else it was coming up against. It proved that the Japanese aviation industry could produce aircraft just as good as anything else anybody else was producing. It should have been a wake-up call for the West, but unfortunately the A5M remained pretty much unknown. And it wasn't until 4 years later, when the Zero came on the scene, that people really noticed that Japan could produce aircraft as good as anybody. The A5M was the first production single-seat carrier-borne fighter built as a cantilever monoplane, and it was also one of the most agile monoplanes ever built. The A5M possessed basically the biplane advantages implemented in a monoplane. Okay, so what do we get in the box? To start with, it's an A5M2b Claude. This is the late version as against the early version they already released, 1/72. Kit number CP72009. This is an advanced kit, which means there's going to be photo etch masks in here, but no resin. On the side we've got 4 decal options there. There's nothing much on the other side, apart from to say it's 84 plastic parts, 41 photo etch parts, and it'll end up, front to back, 10.5 centimeters, so about just over 4 inches, and 15 centimeters wingspan. It's about 6 and a bit inches. So just take the thin cardboard top off, and we're left with a solid, complete cardboard box, which is a nice touch. But inside we have bag with all the parts, instructions, colours called out in Mr. Colour, and the AK interactive range, and named as well. I know some of the names are propeller colour, cowling colour. Yeah, they're not awfully helpful. As we got, as you can see, some parts are not used, therefore bits that are used in the early version. Decal sheet, instructions. We'll go through the instructions in a bit more detail in a minute. There's one. There's your 4 decal options, essentially variations on a theme. They've all got the same colour scheme, different decals for the most part by the looks of it. So inside the bag we have it's a Ziploc baggie. As you can see, a dark grey plastic. We have there's the decal sheet. Also in here. In the back here you can see there's masks for the clear parts, clear part for the instrument panel. Usually an option, and there's your 41p parts. I'll hold it way up. Look at that instrument panel, engine. I'll see where the other bits go. Clear part. There's 3 of them, I looks at. Let's have a look, see what I can see that there's lines, panel lines on here, and rivet lines. I can't feel them with the with my finger, but if I scrape my nail over it I can feel them. So they're obviously quite finely recessed. So you need to not lay the paint down very thick so you don't cover them up. Wings, top and bottom, lots of nice detail. Note there's no alignment pins anywhere, there's none here either, so you need to pay some attention to getting things lined up as well. And then we have 2 frets, 2 sprues, sorry, alternative, looks like main cowling tops. I think one of these won't be used. Yeah, looking at this one's not used, that one's used on this kit, the late version. Again, I see some raised detail on there and fine rivets. A lot of really fine detail on here, which you'll have to be careful with. And then so it seems to be the engine for the most part. Cylinders have got cooling fins on them. Lots of nice detail on there. It looks like most of these parts do in fact get used. The only bits that don't are these things here. So no, it looks quite nice. So far, really nice detail, very subtle. You'll have to be careful with, no alignment pins, but a really nicely detailed kit. So let's have a close-up look at the instructions and a close-up look at some of the parts. So a history in plastic. For the A5M2b there's only about 7 or 8 boxings in this scale. The modern ones come down to a kit released in 2017 by AVI Models, reboxed a few times, also reboxed even more times by LF Models. But they won't have the level of detail that the clear prop kit does with its resin photo etch. Basically it's on a different level as far as the amount of detail goes. There's actually, just as an aside, there's been quite a few versions of the A5M in general. A5M4 was the main production version. But even though some of those go back a long time, and the latest ones are the AVI and LF models, but it looks like Clearprop are moving in and going to sort of move the bar to a new level with their level of detail. So in the box we have 84 plastic parts, 41 PE parts, painting masking sheet for the canopy, a decal sheet and a full colour 8-page glossy paper instruction sheet. I just want to note that this is an advanced level kit, not an expert kit. The first release they did of the early version of the A5M2b was an expert kit with more photo etch and a bunch of resin as well. This kit does not have the resin, and there's a few less pieces of photo etch. There's a lot of similarities between the plastic in the two kits. The main difference is the fuselage halves. The area behind the cockpit is different, and there's you're using a lot of the plastic that was extra in the expert kit. You're now using it in this kit because you don't have the resin to replace it. But other than that, there's a lot of the same parts. There's actually a few more extra parts in here that are unused. So starting on the first page of the instructions with step 1, we'll start off working on the instrument panel. You've got a couple of choices for the instrument panel. You can either sand off the details and use a decal, or you can put on the acetate film that's applied, along with use one part of the photo etch as well. Step 2 is the cockpit. Again, pilot seat, and you're supplied with photo etch seat belts. Step 3 is basically the frame at the back of the cockpit. Put some parts on this, some more photo etching here, and the pilot seat is attached as well. Step 4 is the bottom of the cockpit. That's mostly plastic, but again more photo etch going in here as well. Step 5, you're basically bringing together the 3 main assemblies you've created in the first 4 steps. So essentially you've got the cockpit and the 2 forward firing machine guns in the fuselage. And then step 6, we're adding details to the port side of the fuselage half. Note the fuselage halves do not have mating pins to get them lined up, so you have to be careful when we get to that step. Over the page we go on to step 7, where we start off by adding a couple of details to the starboard side of the cockpit in the starboard fuselage half. Then we join the fuselage halves together, trapping the cockpit that we created in step 5 between the two. Have to pay some attention here because there's no alignment pins. Down to step 8, I'm going to start putting the engine together, adding a few parts together. Then quite nicely detailed cylinder heads. So you'll end up with a nice looking engine. Onto step 9, add cowling top and bottom. Step 10, I can see you adding the exhaust string goes on the back and some more fine parts. And step 11, putting the 2 halves of the fuel tank together along with the struts that hold it. And step 12 is putting the two main wheels together. They come as in 2 halves. Next we have step 13, where we put the wing together. Basically a 1-piece lower wing and a 2-part upper wing, port and starboard. You have to drill some holes before you get going. Although to say it is optional, depends if you want to have things hanging underneath the aircraft, such as the fuel tank you made in step 11 and some bombs that might come later. Again, no alignment pins in here, so you'll have to be a bit careful. Steps 14 and 15 are basically the same thing, trapping the main wheel between the 2 spats. Again, nice detail on these. Throughout this, all the plastic on here has some very fine recessed and raised panel lines, rivet detail, and it is very fine indeed. If you put on a thick layer of paint, you could easily lose it. Down to step 16, and putting most of the big parts of the aircraft together: fuselage, wings, rudder, elevators, ailerons go on here as well, they're separate items. And you also put in the forward part of the fuselage in front of the cockpit. Step 17, we fit the undercarriage, fit the fuel tank if you drilled the holes for it in the wing. Gun camera goes on, and some small parts underneath the aircraft, the arrestor hook, tail wheel. And then step 18, at the bottom of the last step, you put on the engine, the propeller, and some small parts on top of the aircraft, including the canopy, and that completes the build. I will notice that you have clear parts for where the navigation lights go on either end of the wings. So paints and decals, you get 4 options. All the paints are called out by name in the Mr. Colour range and the AK Interactive range, and you get a colour swatch as well. A couple of the names are a bit funky though: propeller colour and cowling colour. Perhaps should say a more descriptive colour might have been better there. Basically you have 4 painting options, all pretty similar. Basically the difference is the decals. You get a nice decal sheet, I'll show it here, with nice looking decals on it, and some more, some of the options have more text on the aircraft. The 4 options are all from 1938, basically all natural metal for the most part, with red tails and a variety of inscriptions on them. So an overall conclusion, basically it's a follow-on to Clear Prop's early version of this aircraft. Not as many parts, no resin, not quite as much photo etch. Still have to deal with the fact that there's no alignment pins for the fuselage and the wings, but if you've got a couple of kits under your belt, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Very nicely detailed plastic. Very fine details, in fact. You have to be careful not to lose the details under paint and varnish. But that being said, it's a very nice little kit. Should go together well, should look very nice on the shelf when it's completed. And don't forget, you can get this from our shop.